back to Atypical Talk. This is a podcast where we have conversations that illuminate the intersection of faith, culture, and the common spaces of our humanity. I'm Abby.
I'm Joel.
I'm Kenton.
And today we're jumping right into it. We're talking about season 2 of Shiny Happy People. It's about Teen Mania. We'll get into it a little bit, but we're going to read the summary off of a U.S. Magazine article titled Teen Mania Survivors Share Shocking Experiences in Shiny Happy People, From Cat Food to Coffins. Shiny Happy People, A Teenage Holy War, delves into the controversial world of Teen Mania Ministries, a prominent evangelical youth organization founded by Ron Luce in the 1990s. Luce, now 64, toured the organization's Acquire the Fire events throughout major cities in the U.S. and Canada. Other programs included Global Expeditions mission trips, Honor Academy internships, and extreme camps held at the Teen Mania campus in Texas. This docuseries shines a spotlight on the alleged psychological and physical harm inflicted upon its young participants. Through compelling testimonies, the series aims to expose the darker side of an organization that once captivated thousands of teenagers across America. A crucial element of the series is the Recovering Alumni blog, which served as a vital platform for former members to share their experiences and begin a healing process. Among the many brave individuals who came forward was Micah Ringo, whose anonymous yet detailed accounts of abuse included claims of being forced to consume cat food and confined in coffins with insects, provided a chilling insight into the alleged practices within Teen Mania. Despite the gravity of these accusations, which were reportedly presented to Teen Mania's board, the organization largely denied the claims. This stance of denial only further fueled the controversy surrounding the ministry. Ultimately, Teen Mania Ministries faced insurmountable financial difficulties, leading to its filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in 2015 and the cessation of its operations. However, the closure of the ministry did not erase its enduring impact. For many former members, the experiences within Teen Mania left a lasting imprint, with a significant number remaining loyal to the organization's teachings and ideals, even after its official disbandment. The docuseries seeks to understand this complex legacy and the long-term effects on those who were part of this evangelical youth movement. So I thought this documentary was very interesting. I had never gone to Acquire the Fire or anything like that. But have you guys been to anything that Teen Mania put on?
Yeah, I think when I was middle school, early high school, I think I went 4 or 5 different times to, it was Acquire the Fire events. They were held at, the field house, Conseco Field House at the time, Gamebridge Field House now, or I think RCA Dome before Lucas Oil. I think a really big one there. So yeah, I went 4 or 5 times when I was younger, middle schoolish. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, it would have been about the same. I think I went, 2 or 3 times, and it would have been middle school ish time. So mid-ish 2000s.
Yeah. Can you guys talk a little bit about what those events were like?
Yeah, I honestly, when I saw that this documentary was coming out, I was kind of like, oh no, because my memories and experience with it were mostly positive on the surface. Like, I remember I went to a small church with a small amount of teenagers, and so it was like the first thing that I feel like I did where you were with thousands of other people that were your age, and instead of like somebody with an overhead projector moving like sheets for lyrics and somebody with an acoustic guitar, it was like a full-on rock band or somebody that you've got a CD of, and lights and smoke and pyrotechnics probably at Acquire the Fire. And also I just remember like the teaching and the preaching, it was just like very dynamic and like exciting and calling people to like make a difference in the world kind of thing, which as a middle schooler who was obsessed with, fantasy, sci-fi stories, like big epic adventures, I remember being drawn to it in so many different ways. So on the surface, I just have a ton of memories of like being excited, feeling like I was a part of something bigger than myself. And I just really enjoyed it from my memories of it being a kid. So that was my experience with what I knew at the time.
Yeah.
It's mostly positive.
Yeah, I mean, one year I don't remember much because I just remember I was fighting with my girlfriend at the time.
That really paints a youth group trip there.
Middle school relationship, youth group trip. But yeah, so I have a lot of history of going to like we'll call them Jesus conventions.
That's a good way
like
to
I
say
went
it.
to the Gaither Gathering, if you want to go a little bit more old school, which was like a totally different thing. But then, yeah, this was probably the first thing that I went to outside of, I mean, like Winter Jam. But this was like the first conference, if you will, for like teens that I went to. And same thing that Joel said. It was exciting. It was, I mean, directed right towards us. It had fireworks. It had, flashy lights. Before that was kind of like a norm in church. So it was literally like everything you wanted. And I mean, from my experience, I don't remember some of the things that we'll get into here in a little bit in the same way. Looking back on it, I could probably see some of that. But in it, and when I was going, it just seemed, it was just hype and exciting and like in your face, Jesus.
yeah, unapologetic.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. So that was that was my similar experience too.
Mm-hmm. Did you know of anyone, like, did you have any friends that went to Global Expeditions or Honor Academy, or did you have any knowledge of these things at the time?
I did have knowledge of it because, like it's talked about in the documentary, there was a ramp into it every Acquire the Fire, where they would like try to call people that felt like they had leadership or that God was calling them. They would try to like get them to go to a meeting. And I do remember going to like that meeting at Acquire the Fire for people that felt like called to it. And it was probably a combination of me being like chickening out and like my parents being like, no, this is kind of wild. You're not doing this. Like, why I never did anything with it. Those were my experiences, thinking about those things, but I didn't ever do anything with it, which is wild to hear about some of the stories.
I didn't do anything either, but I mean, I knew of the expeditions, and same thing. Yeah. I mean, a lot of what we talk about will be insider. Doesn't make much sense unless you've watched the thing, or the documentary, but it talks about like filling out the little sheet that had like check mark all the things that you were interested in. I remember doing that. I remember getting phone calls from like the kids or whatever, trying to prompt you or promote you to actually like go on these trips. So yeah, I definitely remember. I never went. I wasn't really into doing like the mission trips or anything like that. And then obviously I was doing other things. So going to some weird church camp was out of the question for me. But yeah, I don't know of anybody specifically that did the camp side of things. I mean, I know of some people that did go on missional trips with or connected to some way to the organization. But yeah.
So this documentary, it really goes in, like, it kind of starts surface level where it's talking about how, Acquire the Fire was run by students and like they had to pay to be there and work and stuff like that. And then it goes deeper and deeper into things like their extreme boot camp is basically what it was, where kids endured crazy things that they said, if you go on mission trips, this is what it's going to be like. This is the things you're going to go through. And it was just insane things. So did you guys have any idea any of this stuff was happening? What like shocked you about what they talked about in the documentary?
Well, yeah, I think there's so much of this, and I think this happens in a lot of unhealthy religious organizations, or even what some people might call cults. Like, they're like on the surface, and like the open door experience is relatively normative, even though we can talk about some of the things at Acquire the Fire that I think ultimately were harmful, but relatively normative. And then like if you go deeper into the belly of the beast, you get into these weirder things, like the extreme camps that felt like boot camp, where they would be emotionally and verbally and I think physically abusing you, trying to make sure that you're tough enough, that you're only relying on God's spirit and all this kind of stuff, which was just so wild to consider. And then also to consider these are kids under 18 years old. Like, I put myself in the shoes of a parent now, and I'm trying to like wrap my head around it, and just the trauma and the lasting damage that it did to people inside of this, all for the sake of, and in the name of Jesus, and trying to make sure people are like standing up for Jesus, is just so disturbing and honestly like infuriating hearing about it. Even though I didn't know anybody that had that experience, and I didn't see that from me attending the Acquire the Fire events, now seeing that it was a part of it and it was the underbelly of it all is so tragic. And I cannot believe that there hasn't been more and more lawsuits and that people are not in jail, honestly. Right. That's what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know, specifically, I guess, that these things were attributed to Acquire the Fire, but I knew that these kinds of things happened, and these crazy boot camps. I mean, I think they called it literally Hell Week for Marines. If you've been in the military or watched any military documentary that talks about just the horrible things they make you go through, some of the things that they showed on the screens of being locked in to coffins or whatever with cockroaches and mice and things that you fear. It's like fear factor mixed with physical exertion for Jesus. It's crazy. And I think one of the things that I did know, and it's kind of intertwined in this whole thing, was being a Jesus martyr. I don't know about Joel, but I grew up kind of being taught that you better stand up for Jesus. After Columbine, when the whole story went around and that wasn't really what happened, but it was all pushed that, people lost their lives because they stood up and claimed that they followed Jesus.
And we were prepared for that in a way. That was the pinnacle of our spiritual maturity, was that in a crowded room when our lives were on the line. I really think that, I know for a fact that was just something that was ingrained in me. Wow. I don't think I thought maybe to the extent that they did some of the people who went through this, that they were being trained to be a martyr, but it was someday you may be called upon to stand up and claim your faith, and sure, I'll stand up and claim my faith, but it was literally at gunpoint. You're going to do it, and if you don't, you don't go to heaven because you lied or whatever. And you also mentioned too, just talking about the elements that were very much fear factor inside of some of these camps and experiences, which is it's just so much darker and more twisted to think fear factor. When that show's on, people were doing it for money.
Yeah.
And they were signing up for it, and they knew what it was. Yeah. And this was saying basically, well, if you're not brave enough, you don't love Jesus, and you're not a Christian. You know what I mean?
This is your biggest fear. Experience your biggest fear, and if you don't have enough faith, you fail as a Christian.
Exactly.
They talk a lot about how talk about how it's all failure. They build you up, but then they put you through the worst thing ever, and they say, well, you're not a good enough Christian because you can't get through this on faith alone.
Yeah. Just really, really dark.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, I'm laughing, but it's just because of the absurdity and how wild it actually was to think that, and these were kids that were put through this in the name of Jesus. It's just wild to consider how harmful and abusive it was.
Mm-hmm. A big thing that a lot of the people that were on the documentary talked about was the shame factor of it. There was one woman on there that she was a worship leader, and she talked about how at the Honor Academy she kissed a boy, and they literally shunned her, kicked her out, told people that were still in the Honor Academy they couldn't talk to her. It was such a psychological thing. Even if you weren't going through the extreme camp, there were still so many psychological elements where they were shaming you, and if you make a small mistake, you're not going to have these friends anymore, you're not going to be a part of this organization anymore. And it's dark.
It is dark. And to think there's just there's such a large gap between, hey, you signed this thing and this is our standards of conduct, and you broke this, and so we need to there needs to be some kind of action. There's a gap between that and we are now going to turn our backs on you. You do not exist. You are on the outside of the group. You know what I mean? There's every organization has those kind of standards and things, and there has to be some kind of form of, you can call it discipline or action. But the way that it was done, of shaming and of turning your back on them and excluding them, is so bad. And then you layer on top of it, these people are, in air quotes, spiritual authorities with the spiritual authority of Jesus. What does that mean about you? It's going to heap more shame and deeper ways on top of you that I'm sure she's still working through.
Well, then she worked so hard to get back and you got to watch the documentary.
I know.
This whole section is
it is
you're
crazy.
What in the world? Because then she works hard to come back just because it's so ingrained in the community, and they talk a little bit about that. But she comes back, and then they put her in this video literally about being attacked by the fall of a woman leading a man astray kind of video that goes to every I mean, I'm sure it was probably played in
every session.
And so it's just, so not only that, but then she comes back, under the guise, I'm sure that they said, well,
harlot,
all is forgiven, but
she's
you're
the
still,
harlot character.
you marked. You have a scarlet letter. Like, it's just, yes, there's got to be rules, and you're, teenagers and all that kind of stuff, but like, that is wild.
It really is, and so sad.
Yeah. A lot of the people that were interviewed on there, like, you could see them, they were like shaking, talking about these things. Like, this is crazy trauma that they went through. And it played the recording of when Micah was on the phone with one of the leaders of the organization. I forget his name right now. And he straight up told her, he said, well, this stuff that people are saying happened, it's not true. I mean, some of it happened, but not all of it. People are making up stuff. Like, he just brushed it off like it was nothing, and then, took some jabs at Micah for collecting these stories and trying to create this community of people that went through this. And you really have to watch the documentary. Like, it's so sad, the things that they all went through.
Yeah, you really do see the aim from Teen Mania to protect the institution. Like, you sort of see, like, there's a scandal, and instead of them like actually doing the right thing, which is to investigate it, repent, try to restore relationship, or at least to own up to your part of it so that you can move forward, they just shut down to protect institution, and we're the good guys, you're the enemies. They're just attacking a good thing. And here again is that religious layer that God is doing, a good thing that God is doing, and they're attacking. So now they're on par with the devil. You know what I mean? And it just, you see this play out. And Micah and those who were a part of this group of survivors just kept telling their stories and not lying, but saying like, hey, the best way to stop darkness is to let there be sunlight. It's the best disinfectant, as they say. And that's actually what began to bring healing. And other people hearing stories and like, oh my gosh, that was like my story too. I thought I was the only one, me too. And it just brought a lot of healing to a lot of people because the psychological warfare of it was so terrible. So yeah, you totally see how the institution tried to just protect themselves instead of protecting victims and learning and growing from their experience.
Yeah, I think your common defense is always going to, to be defensive in nature. I think we all do that. But yeah, when you do it and you do your entire thing under the guise of being like called by God to do this ministry, I think you just instantly, it's not even being defensive. You're just like, well, we have the right to do this regardless of how crazy it is, because it's talked a lot about in church, but like, because look at the fruit of what we've done. Look at all these things that we've changed. We don't care about all the people we literally terrorized for decades and put through physical torment and emotional torment, but because it's my mission from God to do these things. The
ends justify the means kind of thinking, right? And we see that, sadly, it's very prevalent inside of church and nonprofits and religious organizations as well. We've talked about this so often over the last couple of years, but one of the things we keep coming back to is this unique kind of trauma that religious trauma is. Because there can be physical abuse and trauma inside of it, and there's definitely emotional abuse and trauma inside of it, but something with religious trauma is on a soul level, and what we think about ourselves and what we think about who God is, what we think about people that speak on God's behalf, it just destroys so much, and it leaves people in shambles, because these are the people that are supposed to not only be protecting me, but demonstrating to me the character of God, right? That's like some of the strong warnings for people that teach and lead in the New Testament are because hey, you guys are the hands and feet of God, showing them, demonstrating who God is. And when people abuse people, kids, like we see in the story, it just destroys what they think a good Heavenly Father is. It destroys what they think good leadership is. It destroys what a healthy version of authority is, right? They talked so much in the documentary of how authority was just this push down and destroy them, beat them down. And and that just is such a evil way to understand authority inside of this. And it just does so much damage if we've been hurt inside of a church, inside of a small group experience, inside of a student ministry experience, inside of a nonprofit, any religious organization we do, because there's this extra layer of these people were supposed to be God's hands and feet. And instead they were like swords that stabbed me and hurt me. And that's what breaks my heart inside of this.
I think that's why it's almost impossible to couple God and, Jesus with like this idea of like army and war. I think because, and just all their experience of doing these like crazy, like basic training level things, but also just the idea of breaking people down. Like the whole point of that in like basic training for the military is so that you function without needing to think. Your reactions just become action, and you don't have to, whatever's going on around you, literal explosions are just...
Which is so dark now that you say that, and I think about what that does to
that's
people.
That's what it is, though.
Well, but it's for church and religious things. That's
what I'm saying is
crazy.
like we're taking that and we're literally saying that we're an army, that we're at war, to the point where we're literally breaking people down, so their only reaction is just this war mentality of like not listening, not looking around them, but like you're just shoving Jesus down their throats.
Us versus them. We're the good guys. They're the bad
Jesus,
guys.
But not, the Jesus. But like, there's good versus evil, and everything but you is evil. Like, and again, back to what I said earlier, like you'll be the martyr. Like everything is against you, and we only want you to think one way. Like it truly is just breaking them down to have total control over teenagers. And it gets to that later on in like maybe the last episode when it starts to talk about the twist of political activism that happens.
Yep. That was a part of the story that I must have been out of Acquire the Fire by the time it moved to that battle cry thing. In the documentary, it talks about how they had a shift from just doing youth programming, like these youth rallies, trying to get people to like stand up, be unashamed for Jesus. And it went to like, just out of the mouth of the leader of Teen Mania saying that we want to build up culture warriors to take our culture back for Jesus from these leftist MTV, like all the bugaboos, probably Harry Potter and all the things thrown together. Definitely like all these like evil, demonic pop culture kind of things. And it really, for lack of a better term, got in bed with a right-wing politic. And it was wild to see some of the clips from those battle cry events that were just so militant, and riding around in tanks, like the Lord's army as not a
weird red and black flag situation that looks a little bit like Nazi flags. It was just way weirder than I thought.
I just never had that experience with it, and I wonder as a young kid if I maybe wouldn't have seen it the same way. But I'm just watching it, and I'm like, wow, this really is the next evolution of that kind of strong control building up God's army, was like to try to like maximize these people to be culture warriors and to just use political means to bring God's kingdom, in air quotes, the way that we want it to be, but it's using force, maybe violence.
But it's not really even the way we want it to be. That's the craziest part, is it's the way that like these 5 leaders want it to be. Like Ron Luce, the leader of all of Teen Mania and Battle Cry, he kept saying like, I just want these kids to be culture warriors and prevent this. But like, he was the voice. They're not following Jesus. They're not thinking for themselves, honestly. They've been so indoctrinated to only follow that one voice. It is just celebrity church culture to a militant degree.
Yeah. No, when I was back in high school, I remember, maybe this was more middle school, but I had friends, like homeschool friends, that were very into politics. And so looking back, I'm like, were they part of that? Like, is that how they really got into it and stuff? And it's just, looking back, it was a weird world. Like, it just felt weird that these kids were so into politics, when that's not really a kid's world. But
no, but again, coming back to like the religious layer of all this, if you are mixing this one way of seeing politics with eternal things like God and Jesus and the devil and the evil world. If you start mixing this and you have these military language where there are our team, the enemy, of course you're going to get kids that are obsessed with it. You know what I mean? Of course you're going to, because they think they're not just standing up for some dude's version of a political perspective. They think that this is Jesus.
Yeah, well,
exactly. And they think like this is the right way. And so I've got to fight for it. And you know what? I might need to do bad things so a good thing can get done, you know? And it's just wild because when you start mixing these worlds together and pushing, you know, people down for your sense of power, it just does so much harm. And then, you guys, these were all kids.
Yeah.
All under 18. Like, this is the thing I keep coming back to. Like, middle school, high school, their brain's not even close to being fully developed. They're in like a high energy, high pressure situation where they're asking people to stand and, you know, yell, I'll take the cross kind of thing, like in like a social situation. And then to put them in these environments that break them down mentally, emotionally, physically, with high control. It's just, these are kids.
Yeah, you're a kid and all you want is a leader. Like whether that's your parent, you know, or whatever. And then you get put in this, maybe sent to this by your parents or whatever. And then, so you're like, well, that, you know, that leader figure in my life is now telling me that I should follow, you know, well, ultimately Jesus, but this leader figure who's, you know, intercessing on his behalf in Ron or whoever it might be. And then, they're just, it's total crazy child exploitation mixed with free child labor mixed with, evil is what that is.
I just when I think about the kids thing, I think about what I think seem to be maybe some of Jesus' most harsh words he ever had recorded for us in the New Testament. It's all over in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but Jesus is talking about letting the little children come to him, let the little ones come to him, and then he sort of caps this section off with a warning. He says, whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it'd be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he was drowned in the depths of the sea. Jesus goes like full mob boss on like, protect the kids, take care of the
Jesus.
kids. Sassy.
I think I've said that on podcasts. I love intense Jesus. It's so good.
And it's interesting, like these are always these harsh phrases that Jesus says are never directed at like the sinners, never directed at children or those who are vulnerable, always directed at those who are taking advantage of people. And right here, taking advantage and hurting children, young people, and like to think like the ends justify the means. Like Jesus don't play that game, you know, and you can't find him doing it with kids. And so it's just so abusive and so sad.
Yeah. So Joel, you were talking to me yesterday about the section in the documentary where they ask people, you know, are you still a Christian? You said that something about that stuck out to you. Can you talk on that a little bit?
Yeah, that broke my heart because over 3 episodes, you're hearing people that had lived in this world and their story now in present tense, and they're looking back, and then near the end, they're basically asking them all the question, like, are you a Christian today? What do you believe today? And, you know, it was breaking my heart in a lot of ways because most of them were like, no, I left that world behind, or no, that's not something I want to be a part of anymore. Of course, because of what they experienced, right? You can't blame them for that. But there was one woman who said something that I just could not shake and still cannot shake. She said, yeah, I'm a Christian. And then she stopped and paused. She goes, but I'm like the Jesus kind of Christian. And I just like, I have goosebumps right now as I said it out loud because like, it just broke me so much because I'm like, what other kind is there? And like the fact she feels like she has to qualify that with a word that means little Christ or like Jesus, you know, follower of Jesus, disciple of Jesus, someone who's like him. It was just so sad that there are Christian, air quote, organizations and churches and institutions that are pumping a version of the word Christian out there that is void of the person of Jesus. And it was just such a warning to me and something that I've just been running through my brain all the time. Like, man, if it doesn't look, smell, taste like Jesus, you know, sound like, you know, all those different kind of things, it's not Christian. And it's so easy to get the word Christian tied up with a version of politics from the left and the right. It's easy to get it tied up with power and with influence over culture. But you also just have to you have to reckon with the words and the way of Jesus and the stories of Jesus that you see in the Gospels and be like, no, that's If it's not like Jesus, it's not Christian. And that's what broke me about what she said. I just don't think I'll ever forget it, because of the way she said it, and then realizing all that she had gone through. Killed me.
Yeah.
Honestly, watching the documentary made me just realize, especially as we got to like the last episode and the political Jesus and all of that kind of thing, like these people, and then that lady saying that, my heart broke for that too. But like, they're not really following Jesus, they're just following power, because I mean, Jesus doesn't physically harm you. Jesus doesn't repeatedly tell you that you're not good enough, because of whatever reason you're not good enough. Just have enough faith and then maybe you'll be good enough. Like, those just aren't things. And that was the entire premise of most of what that world was. And I remember some of that. Like at Acquire the Fire, it was literally die to yourself. I do remember that. And I thought of it different back then when I was a 10-year-old boy or 11-year-old boy, whatever. But like, die to yourself, and then that's the only way you can get there. Like, there's just, I feel the same thing Joel talked about with that lady, just having to preface that or add that little tag on and be like, yeah, not my Jesus. But yeah, I just don't think, I mean, I kind of agree with her, but all that to say, like, those people weren't acting as Christians.
It was about power. They were following power, not following Jesus, which is a good warning for all of us,
Again, this is Shiny Happy People Season 2. You can watch it on Amazon Prime Video, so you do have to pay Bezos to watch it. But I mean, it's a good documentary, so I encourage you to watch it. If you have any questions or topics, you can email those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at atypicaltalkpod. And make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to get updates when new episodes go live. We hope that these conversations today have helped you think wider, love deeper, and partner with God to bring the up there down here in your everyday life. Thanks for listening.